The river churned with shadows beneath the moonlight. Sharp fins sliced the surface, circling in a frenzy. The air smelled of damp earth, sweat, and fear. Zyra trembled, her pale, iridescent skin glowing softly under the torches held by her captors. She was bound, wrists tied, shoulders aching from being dragged to the riverbank. Her violet eyes darted around, searching for a way to escape, but there was none. The reptilian aliens who had captured her, brutish figures with thick scales and cruel yellow eyes, laughed among themselves. One of them, the leader, flicked his forked tongue and grinned. "She will make fine bait," he hissed. The others chuckled, their long claws gripping the rope that held her bound. Zyra's breath hitched. Her people, the Syrian, were not warriors. They were a peaceful race, stranded on this hostile planet. She had been gathering food when the reptilians attacked, claiming she had trespassed. Now they were offering her to the river, to the creatures lurking below. Piranhas, flesh-eaters. She swallowed hard as the leader pulled out a dagger and sliced the rope holding her feet. He grasped her by the arm and dragged her to the edge. Terror clenched her throat. She struggled, but their grip was unbreakable. Then a voice rang out. A deep, firm voice that cut through the cruel laughter like a blade. "Let her go." Silence fell. The reptilians turned, hissing lowly. A human stood at the edge of the firelight. Zyra's gaze locked onto him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair slightly damp with sweat. A scar traced along his cheek, and his steel-gray eyes burned with determination. He wore a torn jacket, dirt smeared across his skin, but there was no fear in his stance. Only defiance. The reptilian leader sneered. "A human? Do you wish to join her in the river?" The man's fists tightened. "No. I'm here to take her back." The leader chuckled. "Why? What is she to you?" For a moment the human hesitated. Then he said, "Mine." Zyra's breath caught. The reptilians looked at each other, then laughed. "She is not yours. She is food." The leader shoved Zyra forward. Her foot slipped. The river roared below, the water alive with slashing tails and gnashing teeth. The human moved. Fast. Before she could fall, he lunged, grabbing her waist and yanking her back. She crashed into his chest, breathless. The scent of him, earth, sweat, something warm, filled her senses. The leader snarled. "You dare!" The human drew a weapon, a blade old but sharp. He pointed it at them, his stance unwavering. "Come and find out." The reptilians hesitated. The human's confidence, his fire, made them wary. Then the leader scowled. "Take him." The warriors surged forward. Zyra's heart pounded as the battle began. And for the first time in her life she saw a human fight. Not with fear. Not with hesitation. But with the sheer, unbreakable will to protect. Zyra had never seen anything like it. The human fought with a wild, untamed ferocity that sent the reptilians stumbling back. His movements were precise, each strike deliberate, every dodge calculated. He wasn't just attacking. He was outmaneuvering them, reading their movements before they even made them. A blade flashed toward him, but he ducked, twisting with effortless speed. His fist slammed into the attacker's jaw, sending the reptilian crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. Another lunged, claws bared, but the human sidestepped, catching the creature's wrist and twisting hard. A sickening crack echoed through the night as the alien howled in pain, dropping its weapon. Zyra could only watch, stunned. Humans were supposed to be weaker than most species in the galaxy. They didn't have natural armor, venom, or enhanced speed. And yet, this one fought like he was born for battle. The leader of the reptilians hissed in frustration. "Kill him!" Two more warriors rushed forward. The human's eyes flicked toward Zyra, just for a second, but that glance sent warmth through her chest. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for her. One of the reptilians swung a jagged blade, but the human ducked and rammed his shoulder into the attacker's gut. The creature stumbled, and the human capitalized, grabbing the alien's own knife and driving it into its thigh. A scream. A heavy thud. Another enemy down. The last warrior hesitated. The human straightened, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths, his blade dripping with dark, alien blood. Who's next? The reptilian stepped back. Coward. The leader let out a sharp growl. Enough of this. Zyra barely had time to react before something hit her, hard. A fist slammed into her stomach, knocking the air from her lungs. Pain flared through her ribs as she collapsed to the dirt, gasping. The human turned, rage flashing across his face. Too late. The leader grabbed her by the hair and yanked her up, pressing a blade to her throat. The world slowed. The human froze, his knuckles white around his weapon. Zyra winced as the cold steel bit into her skin. I should slit her throat, the leader snarled. End this now. The human's jaw tightened. You won't. The leader's eyes gleamed with malice. Give me one reason why. The answer came without hesitation. Because if you do, the human said, voice dangerously low, I will make sure you don't leave this place alive. Zyra's breath caught. Something about the way he said it, calm, certain, like a promise, sent a shiver through her. The leader scoffed, but there was uncertainty in his gaze now. His grip on the blade wavered, just slightly. That was all the human needed. In an instant, he moved. A blur of motion, fast, precise. He lunged, grabbing the leader's wrist before he could react. A sharp twist, a cry of pain, and the blade clattered to the ground. Zyra stumbled back as the human spun, driving his knee into the alien's gut. The leader doubled over, gasping. Another strike, an elbow to the jaw, and the reptilian collapsed. Silence. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, Zyra realized. It was over. The other reptilians had fled, abandoning their fallen leader. The human stood above him, blade poised for the final strike. But he hesitated. His chest rose and fell, his eyes dark with something unreadable. Then, with a deep breath, he lowered the weapon. He's not worth it, he muttered. He turned to Zyra, stepping closer. She looked up at him, her heart still racing. You saved me. His lips quirked into a small, tired smirk. Yeah. Guess I did. A pause. Then, softer, are you hurt? Zyra swallowed. I don't think so. Relief flickered in his gaze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The night was quiet now, only the distant hum of the river filling the air. Then, Zyra finally asked, Who are you? He hesitated. Then, Dane. A simple name. But to her, in this moment, it felt like something far more. He offered his hand. And without thinking, she took it. Zyra's fingers curled around Dane's hand, his warmth grounding her. The moment their skin touched, something strange pulsed through her, a quiet sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. She let him pull her to her feet, her legs still unsteady from fear and exhaustion. The river behind them gurgled hungrily, its dark depths still teeming with the creatures that had nearly claimed her life. She shuddered at the thought. Dane must have noticed because his grip on her tightened, just slightly. We need to move. They might come back with reinforcements. She nodded, swallowing hard. Her mind was still spinning. Dane. A human. She had heard stories about them. Restless, unpredictable, yet fiercely protective of their own. But why had he risked his life for her? A stranger? Can you walk? He asked, watching her closely. Zyra took a shaky step forward, then another. Yes. I think so. Dane gave a satisfied nod, then turned. Come on. He led the way into the dense jungle, moving with a quiet confidence that told her he had been surviving here for a while. The sounds of the night surrounded them, distant chirps, rustling leaves, the occasional growl of some unseen predator. Zyra walked beside him, stealing glances at his face. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. Despite the fight, he didn't seem shaken. If anything, he looked focused, as if danger was something he lived with every day. After several minutes, curiosity finally got the better of her. You didn't have to save me, she said softly. Dane glanced at her, his expression unreadable. I did. She frowned. Why? A pause. Then, he exhaled. Because leaving you to die wasn't an option. Her breath caught. His voice was steady, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Something about that unsettled her. Not in a bad way, just different. Most species in the galaxy weren't like that. Among the Syrian, survival was about balance. They helped each other when possible, but self-preservation always came first. But Dane? He had thrown himself into battle against multiple enemies for her. A complete stranger. She had no idea what to make of that. They walked in silence for a while, the jungle growing denser. Then, suddenly, Dane stopped. Zyra nearly ran into him. What? He raised a hand, silencing her. She followed his gaze. Ahead, through the foliage, flickering lights glowed in the darkness. A settlement. Dane's expression darkened. Damn it! Zyra frowned. What is it? Dane turned to her, voice low. That's not my camp. That's them. Her stomach twisted. The reptilians. She took a step back, panic rising. We have to go. Dane didn't move. His eyes scanned the settlement, calculating. They have supplies. She blinked. And I need them. Zyra's eyes widened. You can't be serious. Dane turned to her fully. I can't keep running forever. I don't have enough food and my gear is wearing out. This might be my only chance. Zyra stared at him. You just fought them. They'll kill you if they catch you. A smirk ghosted over his lips. Then I won't get caught. Zyra clenched her fists, frustration and disbelief swirling in her chest. You're reckless. Dane chuckled. I've been called worse. He started moving forward, careful to stay in the shadows. Zyra hesitated. Every part of her screamed that this was a bad idea. The smart thing to do would be to run, to get as far from these creatures as possible. But as she watched Dane disappear into the darkness, she realized something unsettling. She didn't want to leave him. Her chest tightened. Cursing under her breath, she hurried after him. Zyra's heart pounded as she crept behind Dane, staying close to the jungle's shadows. The reptilian settlement was crude but sturdy, stone huts, wooden fences, and torches casting flickering light over the clearing. A few guards patrolled, their sharp eyes scanning the perimeter. Dane crouched behind a stack of crates near the edge of the camp. Zyra knelt beside him, whispering, "This is madness." He flashed her a quick smirk. Probably. She glared at him. His expression softened. Trust me. She didn't know why, but she did. Dane moved like a ghost, slipping through the camp's outskirts with silent precision. Zyra followed, heart hammering. He seemed to know exactly where to go, avoiding open spaces, keeping to the shadows. They reached a supply hut, its entrance guarded by a single reptilian warrior. Dane studied the alien for a moment, then turned to Zyra. Stay here. She opened her mouth to protest, but before she could, he was already moving. Zyra watched as he slipped up behind the guard. A swift motion, an arm around the alien's neck, a muffled struggle, then silence. The reptilian slumped to the ground. She exhaled, impressed despite herself. Dane dragged the body aside, then beckoned her forward. They slipped into the hut, closing the door behind them. Inside, shelves were stacked with supplies, dried food, water containers, weapons. Dane grabbed a satchel and started filling it with whatever he could carry. Zyra hesitated, then reached for a small medical kit. If they got hurt, they'd need it. A sudden noise outside made them both freeze. Voices. Footstep. Dane moved fast, grabbing Zyra's wrist and pulling her behind a stack of crates. She pressed against him, her body tensed as the door creaked open. 2 reptilian guards stepped inside, speaking in their guttural language. Zyra barely breathed. Dane's hand was on her waist, steady, warm. The guards shuffled around, checking supplies. Then, one of them moved closer to their hiding spot. Zyra's fingers tightened around Dane's arm. If they were found, there'd be no escape. The guard's clawed feet stopped inches away. Zyra could see his tail flicking behind him, smell the musky scent of his scales. Dane's hand slid from her waist, brushing against hers. She felt his silent message. Be ready. Her heart thundered. The guard turned. Another voice called from outside. The guard grunted, then walked away. The door shut behind him. Zyra let out a shaky breath. Dane smirked. See? Easy. She shot him a look. You call that easy? Could have been worse. He stood, hoisting the bag over his shoulder. Come on. We need to leave before they realize something's missing. They slipped out of the hut, moving fast. But just as they reached the edge of the settlement, a sharp shout rang out. Zyra's stomach dropped. The missing guard had been found. Torches flared. The camp erupted into chaos. Dane grabbed her hand. Run! They sprinted into the jungle, dodging branches and roots as reptilian warriors roared behind them. Arrows whistled past. One struck a tree just inches from Zyra's face. Dane pulled her faster, his grip firm. Almost there. The river came into view. Zyra's chest tightened. It was still teeming with piranhas. She skidded to a stop. Dane! He didn't hesitate. Yanking off his jacket, he pulled out a small cylindrical device. With a flick, it ignited, releasing a pulse of electricity into the water. The piranhas scattered. Zyra gaped. How? No time. The reptilians were closing in. Dane grabbed her waist and jumped. Cold water enveloped them. Zyra gasped, the river pulling them under. For a moment, everything was chaos, rushing water, darkness, the distant shouts of their pursuers. Then, Dane's arms wrapped around her. He kicked toward the surface, breaking through just as the electricity faded. Zyra coughed, clinging to him as he swam. Behind them, the reptilians cursed, unwilling to follow into the water. They made it to the far bank, dragging themselves onto the shore, gasping for breath. Dane lay back, laughing between breaths. Told you we'd make it. Zyra sat beside him, shivering, her heart still racing. She turned to him. You're insane. His grin widened. And you're welcome. A pause. Then, she surprised herself by laughing. Dane raised a brow. Didn't expect that. Zyra shook her head, wiping wet strands of hair from her face. I don't understand you. He smirked. That's the fun part. A comfortable silence settled between them. The jungle was quiet again, only the sound of the river filling the air. Then, Dane reached into his bag and pulled out a small ration bar. Hungry? Zyra stared at him. After everything they had just been through, he was offering her food like it was the most normal thing in the world. Something in her chest softened. She took the bar, her fingers brushing his. Thank you, she said quietly. Dane just grinned. Anytime. As they sat there, side by side, Zyra realized something. For the first time since being stranded on this planet, she wasn't afraid. Because she wasn't alone anymore.